Greetings, it is I, Cantus Van Dracovin, Lord and Emperor of the Dracovin Empire, and welcome. It is time to continue our discussion on D20 Modern, the modern take on the 3rd edition of Dungeons & Dragons. So let's talk about where we left off. Equipment. I was talking about some of the basics of it, talking about some of the basic statistics of ranged weapons. Let's talk about those ranged weapons now. Now, last time I was talking about things like ammo capacity, clips, everything like that. There's something important to note that it is normally either a move or full round action to reload a clip, to reload a magazine on a gun, depending on the type of reload it is and the type of setup you have for reloading it. If you make it very easy for yourself to reload, such as a speed loader, it's easier than just loading single bullets in a gun. Now let's talk about the different types of guns. There's handguns. Now handguns are all the pistols, and some of the SMGs and shotguns count as pistols. This is any type of gun that could be classified as an autoloader or automatic, a revolver, or a machine pistol. Any of these type of weapons that qualify under those categories is a handgun. Let's talk about long arms. Long arms are any kind of rifle you have, and most shotguns and SMGs. The other ranged weapons you might have, that includes anything like crossbows, pepper spray, tasers, and flamethrowers. Any kind of special rules for any of those that would apply to them will be listed under the description of those items. For example, flamethrowers. Now the book moves on to talk about ammo. Ammo, of course, has a cost and restriction, just like anything else, but for each of the ammos, they do talk about the types of firearms you would put it into and what it means to use that ammunition. So you can take a look at the descriptions and the charts and figure out what kind of ammunition your various weapons, firearms in particular, would be using. This does include things like bolts if you get a crossbow. Now let's talk about explosives and splash weapons, because this is a very interesting section. Explosives is what we'll talk about first. Now, explosives is any kind of thing that will make, of course, an explosion, an area effect, that will need some kind of way to set itself off, to be detonated. Now, this could either be built in for something like a grenade where you just pull a pin and throw it, or it could be some kind of explosives that you would just add something in. And these could either be thrown, in the case of a grenade, or placed in the case of something like C4. Now, a splash weapon is any kind of item that you throw it and it breaks the contents and spills it all over. It splashes it all over. Splash weapons have rules for if you hit someone directly, or if you're nearby to it, you can get splashed with some of the contents of it. Now, you don't need to be proficient in any of these. The exception is if I have some kind of launcher which fires out, let's say, an explosive or a splash weapon, then I need to be proficient with that. But otherwise, just placing something down or throwing it by itself, don't need to be proficient. Now, each of these will list first the initial damage, or if it's a splash weapon, the direct hit damage. Then it will list the area if it's an explosion, or how much damage it does on a splash if it is a splash weapon. It will tell you the critical. It will tell you any reflex DCs that you might need for half. This is, of course, especially important for explosions. Then it will list the type of damage. Some of them will do more of like a physical damage, like slashing. Others will do fire. It will list the size of it. If it's a medium, whatever it is, then of course you do need one, or you can use 1 or 2 hands. But if it's small or smaller, you just need 1 hand and it counts as a light weapon. It will list the weight, purchase DC, and any restrictions on any of these. Now, when we're talking about explosions, we start in the explosion at the corner of squares. That means we're not starting at the center of the squares. We're using it at an intersection between a number of squares and it's expanding out from that location. Now let's talk about melee weapons. Melee weapons is something that you hit someone in the face with that uses strength to attack and strength to damage. It's as simple as that. When looking at their information, it lists their damage, their critical they would have, any range if you get to throw it, if you can throw the weapon, any range that it would have while doing that, the size of it, which is exactly the same size categories as was talked about in the ranged weapons, any weight it has, the cost, of course, and any restrictions this item might have on it. So that's it for today. I started going over some of the basic equipment. I talked about the different categories of firearms and ranged weapons. I talked a little bit about explosives and splash weapons, and I talked about melee weapons. Just the basics of all of these when you're looking through them and trying to understand them. Next time, I'm going to talk about improvised weapons. I will move into talking about armor and then general equipment that you can have. Anything else that your character may buy. So if you have questions, comments, anything you want to say, anything like I left out, please leave in the comments below. Please like, share, and subscribe to show support for the channel, the Empire, and the work I do. And until the next time, I bid you farewell.